Hi, and welcome back to Grade 7 History and Social Studies Understanding Us. My name is Ms. Burrows, and I am taking over this week. I teach history at Luso Brown Middle School, and today I'm going to be teaching you about the Little Rock Nine and young people's power to change society. Before we keep moving, I want to give a quick shout out to last week's Riddle of the Week winners. Good job, guys. Keep moving and see if you can give this one a shot. What can fill a room but takes up no space? Think about it and send me an email if you think you know the answer. What can fill a room but takes up no space? I know the answer. All right, today you need a couple pieces of paper and a pen or pencil. And here's what's going on. First, we're going to go through our goals and a KWL chart. Second, we're going to go through the words of the day. Third, we are going to be learning the story of the Little Rock Nine. And finally, our mission for today. Here are our goals for today. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to define segregation, identify Supreme Court cases Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education, and explain the significance and impact of the Little Rock Nine. All right, so what is a KWL chart? Well, you're gonna make one. The K stands for know, the W stands for want to know, and the L stands for learned. Make this chart on your piece of paper and take a second to pause if you need to. Once you have the chart, let's keep moving. First, I want you to think, what do you already know about the civil rights movement or segregation or even the Little Rock Nine if you've heard of this story before? When you have your thoughts together, I want you to make a list of things that you already know about those things. Then I want you to ask yourself, what do you want to know about the civil rights movement or segregation? This will go in the middle section of your KWL chart. I recommend trying to think about 2 or 3 things that you want to know, and hopefully those get answered in this video. And if not, you have the beautiful resource of the internet to figure them out for yourself. Once you have those 2 categories, know and want to know, we're not going to look at our chart again until we're done and we've learned something about the Little Rock Nine. All right, here are our words of the day. Some of these you may have seen before, but it's always good to have a good definition of them before we keep moving. First is the civil rights movement. This is an organized struggle by Black Americans to end racial discrimination and gain equality and justice under the law. We typically learn about this in history class when we're talking about the 1950s and 60s, but it's important to understand that it doesn't just start and end out of nowhere. It is a movement and it is very organized and it lasted for a long time and some may argue is still happening today. The NAACP is an abbreviation for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and this was formed in 1909 as a biracial endeavor to advance justice for African Americans. Segregation is the enforced separation of races. Today we're going to be learning about segregation in the schools, but it's important to understand that segregation did not just happen in schools, it was also in public buildings, libraries, churches, bathrooms, some streets, restaurants, and places like that. Separate but equal is the doctrine or phrase that came out of the 1896 court case Plessy versus Ferguson, and this asserted that segregation was legal in the United States as long as the institutions were of equal condition. This gets overturned in 1954 by Brown versus Board of Education, and if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, don't worry, we're going to go into all of this together. All right, so now it's time for the T on the Little Rock Nine. This is them, but before we start to learn about them, we need to kind of look at what happened before they came about. So I made a timeline that kind of gives you an idea of what is going on before the Little Rock Nine do their thing, okay? In the 1950s, segregation was mandated in 17 states and permitted in 4 other states. That doesn't just mean mandated, does not just mean allowed. It means that it was required, and it was only allowed in 4 other states. So 17 states require segregation. In 1952, the average spending on white students was 50% more than students of color. This is spending made by the schools. So white schools are spending 50% more on their students than schools that have students of color. In 1954 is when Brown versus Board of Education happens. And before we can keep moving on this timeline, we need to know, what is Brown versus Board of Education? First thing I'm going to do with you guys is look at this map. This is a map titled Segregation Laws Prior to Brown. They mean Brown versus Board of Education. The green states are those that required segregation. The yellow states are ones that permitted or just allowed segregation. And the red states are ones that prohibited segregation, meaning it's not allowed. Look at this map, and I want you to notice some things. First of all, there are very few states, the 4 that we mentioned, that only allow it, and all of those states are located kind of southwest or west. All of the states that prohibited it are located in the north or the northwest, and all of the states that require it are located in the south, okay? As you can see, Virginia is on this map. So what was Brown versus Board of Education? Well, we just looked at our map where segregation in the United States is about half and half, whether it's required or prohibited or allowed. The NAACP sought out Black parents who would be willing to enroll their children in all-white schools. I want you to understand that this is a very brave thing for these parents and students to do at this time, especially before this Plessy versus Ferguson case gets overturned. In 1951, in Topeka, Kansas, NAACP leaders Charles Scott and Lucinda Todd recruited Oliver Brown to enroll his daughter Linda Brown in an all-white school. Brown was denied enrollment, and the NAACP brought a lawsuit against the school district, arguing that it denied students equal protection granted by the 14th Amendment. They knew that segregation was wrong, but they had to defend it with a constitutional amendment and explain why it contradicts the rights of Americans. So what is the 14th Amendment? Well, the actual 14th Amendment is here for you to see, and I'm going to read it to you. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Let's stop right there. That means if you are born here, you are a citizen. This was part of the amendments that came out during Reconstruction, along with the 13th Amendment that freed African Americans from slavery, and the 14th Amendment makes all people who are born in the United States citizens, therefore making African Americans citizens, and the 15th Amendment, if you remember, gave African American men the right to vote. So that is when this amendment came out. Let's keep reading. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Ms. Bros, what is due process of law? Due process is fair treatment through the judicial system. So fair treatment in the courts, you get your day in court, you get your rights, all of that. Let me get back. Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The NAACP leaders that led this knew that segregation, even though it was a law, was going against a constitutional amendment. And that constitutional amendment is the 14th Amendment that says that everybody born in the United States is a citizen, and if they're a citizen, they have equal protection. And being in 2 different schools that are separate and not equal is not equal protection. So what was the outcome of Brown versus Board of Education? Well, first in the district court, meaning the court in Kansas, the first place that this case gets tried, Kansas said or ruled that the schools were equal despite being segregated. Well, that gets kind of busted. The NAACP challenges it, and it goes all the way to the highest court of the land, the federal court, the Supreme Court. When it's in the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall argues the case, and on May 17, 1954, Supreme Court ruled unanimously to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, and ordered states to integrate with all deliberate speed. Now, this all deliberate speed thing is a problem. Just because this case told the states that they had to integrate the schools doesn't mean that they're going to. Specifically in Virginia, there was a huge movement called massive resistance. In this photo that comes from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture's collection are young, brave children protesting this guy right here. That guy is Harry Byrd. Harry Byrd wanted to lead a movement called massive resistance that led to a group of laws being passed to prevent integration. So while Brown versus Board of Education is saying that integration needs to happen and the federal government is saying it needs to happen, people like Harry Byrd and other southern states are saying, no, not here. And that has been allowed with the all deliberate speed. So if we go back to our timeline, now that we know what Brown versus Board of Education is, we need to understand where the Little Rock Nine came from. So first of all, let's just go through who are they. Well, their names are listed here. They are 9 students from Little Rock, Arkansas, who sought to integrate an all-white high school. This happens 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education, and these brave students are going to volunteer themselves to work with the NAACP to integrate an all-white high school in Little Rock, which is where they lived. On the first attempt of the 9 students enrolling and walking into the school, white parents and community members spit on them, hit them, and yelled at them. You can even see in this photo, this woman screaming in the background. This is from that moment. The governor of Arkansas prevented them from attending the school for 3 weeks with enforcement from the Arkansas National Guard. So the National Guard stood outside the school and prevented them from attending. At the end of September 1957, the Little Rock Nine are escorted into Central High School by the U.S. Army. That's what it took to get them in there. They experienced years of verbal and physical harassment and abuse, and 3 out of 9 eventually graduated from Central High School. Their stories are so brave, and they endured something very traumatic just to make sure that their rights would be secured. Here's another photo to show you just how brave these young people are, being escorted by the Army into school. Now that we've gone through the story of the Little Rock Nine, what I want you to do is take a second and fill in at least one thing that you've learned from our lesson today. When you're done, you can unpause and keep moving. Yay! We're going to take a quick quiz. You're not excited? You should be excited. On another sheet of paper, or in the back, or on the bottom, I want you to write quick quiz that I'm going to do awesome on, and write 4 blanks. First question, what does segregate mean? Second question, what case created separate but equal? What court case? Third question, what court case overturned separate but equal? And finally, number 4, what did the Little Rock Nine do and why? Take a second, go through these questions, make sure that you've got your answers down. When you're done, click unpause or whatever, and we're going to go through them. All right, number 1. Number 1 asked, what does segregate mean? Segregate means the enforced separation of races. Number 2 asked, What case created separate but equal? That was Plessy versus Ferguson. And then number 3, what case overturned separate but equal? That's Brown versus Board of Education. Now, your number 4 might look different than my number 4, but the question was, what did the Little Rock Nine do and why? That's a very important question. Why? Well, I said that they bravely integrated all-white Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education, because segregation was illegal, but states like Arkansas were not integrating their schools, meaning they had to do this so that they could continue to fight, even though the court case had been passed. It was clear that it was not going to happen without a little bit of resistance. Today's mission is very simple, but I am super excited to get y'all's responses to this. I want you to read the quote below from Terrence Roberts. He is one of the Little Rock Nine. I want you to answer the questions below on a sheet of paper after you've read the quote. The quote is this: "My choice to join this group of 9 was an act of bearing witness to the sacrifices of all those who have spilled their blood in the ongoing fight for equal rights in this country." First thing I want you to do is summarize the quote in your own words. Second thing I want you to do is answer this question. The Little Rock Nine played an important role in the civil rights movement as teenagers. What role do you think young people have in changing society? Once you've answered your questions, you will be totally prepared for Thursday's mission. Thank you, and I will see you soon. I'm going to leave you today with a quote from a woman you're going to hear more about on Thursday. This is Daisy Bates. Daisy Bates was a leader of the NAACP, and she wrote for a newspaper in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she led the Little Rock Nine through this journey. The reason that she did this is because she knew that young people were required to help with change. She knew that if she wanted to make a change, she needed to reach out to young people because young people have that kind of power. Kids like you have that kind of power. This is her quote, and it is honestly one of my favorites. "Surely the world we live in is but the world that lives in us." Thank you, and see you soon.